Uh, just building upon ARIMA, let's talk about the individual components of ARIMA, AR, the autoregressive component, then the integrated component, and then finally the moving average component. What purpose do each one of them serve?
Okay, yeah, let's start with the AR component because it comes first. The AR is autoregression. So essentially, you say you model tomorrow's observations as, for instance, 0.4 times yesterday's observations. That's an AR1 model, or today's as a function of tomorrow's as a function of today's. That's an AR1 model. If you model tomorrow's observations, so your forecast is 0.4 times today's observation minus 0.2 times yesterday's observations, that looks back 2 steps in the time series. That's an AR2 model. So on, you can do up to AR whatever you want.
Yeah,
so that's the option. The I, let's keep that for a little later. Let's look at the MA moving average component. The moving average is essentially, you have a forecast for today. That's always wrong because all forecasts are wrong. So you have an error. And what you do is then you forecast for tomorrow 0.2 times today's error, essentially. So you look back into the error, not in the actual value, but into what was the error compared to the forecast for today. And again, and that's an MA1 model, essentially. And you can look back to the error for yesterday's forecast and for today's forecast and use a weighted average of those, and that's an MA2 model. You can put them together. Then you have an ARMA model, an ARMA model, where you have a forecast that depends both on today's and yesterday's and day before yesterday's observations and the errors, the innovations, the residuals from all of these days. So you can have an ARMA 3.2 model that looks at the last 3 observations and the last 2 innovations or residuals. That's an ARMA model. Finally, let's look at the I. Sometimes you have stuff like trends or non-stationarities or whatever, and then you might want to not model the time series itself, but you take the time series and you take successive first differences. So you look at the observation for today minus the observation from yesterday. And you look at the observation yesterday minus the observation from the day before that. So what you're modeling is not the time series itself, but the change time point over time point. And that's, if you just take first differences, that's an I1 situation. And then you can model these first difference time series using an ARMA model. So you have an ARIMA model with for instance, 3 AR components, 1 difference, and in the middle component would be 1, and perhaps 2 MA components, and then you have an ARIMA 312 model. And for the I, you can also take successive differences, so you take first differences and difference them again, then you have second differences, and that's actually models something like a quadratic trend, and you have an I2 model, and you have an ARIMA 322, or something like that.